It is an honor and a pleasure to be in Hong Kong again at the invitation of our Hong Kong Foundation to talk about China's foreign policy in changing times. The changing times meaning, what I want for it to mean is we are in the new era of globalization. I will start with an analysis of what has happened in globalization and why it has happened. Then move on to present you a panoramic view of China's growing role in international affairs with particular reference as an example, as an illustration, reference to China's evolving relationship with G20. Thirdly, I will talk about how China should view and respond to the emerging new era of globalization. The policy options and strategies available to China. First, let us take a look at globalization. We all know globalization is all around us. It affects everyone's life, the life of every company and firms, whatever occupation you are in, it affects us. But now globalization is moving in the direction which we have never seen before. Firstly, culminating in the mid-2016 of Brexit, the British referendum to withdraw from EU, and then end of last year in the unexpected outcome of US election. And then if we move our eyes to European continent, we see radicalization of many political parties in Europe, from Hungary, Italy, France, even to Germany. So you see populism rising almost on every continent, causing social division within a country and among countries. To answer the question of why globalization lands in such a poor situation, we need to be cool-headed this monitor is coming on and off, so it's okay, but I don't see it here. Now I see a picture of you. But anyway, it's, to answer the question of globalization, why globalization is landing in such a poor situation, we need to be cool-headed and take a realistic and historical perspective to the issues at hand. I remember when commenting on the results of the US election, a famous political scientist in America, Fukuyama, who said that the question is not why it had happened in the United States. The question we should ask is why it has happened now, not earlier. Globalization since 1980s, 1970s, 1980s has produced great economic achievements, has accumulated lots of wealth across the globe, and benefiting many, many countries, including China, including the region of Hong Kong. Meanwhile, we have to admit globalization has both winners and losers. We do see certain segments of population in advanced nations, advanced countries, who have lost in this process of globalization in the form of shrinking income, shrinking wealth. And if we look at the larger picture, it is the widening gap between rich and poor, the gap between those who have capital and those who provide labor only. I remember I had a talk with a friend from United States a few weeks ago, and he commented to me very interestingly. He said, you would never anticipated this scenario in the United States now, because it is exactly what had predicted by your ancestor, your ancestor of ideology, Karl Marx. It's more like a class struggle, because the social division has been manifested in the form of a struggle between the elites who are governing the country, elites, of course, including Wall Street, including media, even think tanks, major think tanks, and those people who are on the lowest end of social ladder. Mostly, of course, he refers to people, of those working people in the rusty belts. All those political parties have gone to the extreme right to cater to populism, because populism has exerted huge pressure on those parties in order for them to have votes. So we call it, maybe this is a phenomenon of the party of capital. I mean, capital letters, the party of capital. The problem is not, I would say, with globalization, because globalization has benefited almost everyone. Some more, some less, that's a fact. The problem, I think, the issue at hand is most countries, maybe China is the exception, have failed to address properly the social injustice that has caused by globalization, to alleviate the difficult situation where those people, unfortunate people, who have only labor to offer, have found themselves in. That issue is now driving the political change in the United States and elsewhere. This is Fukuyama. That is Piketty, his book. This is the first part I want to share with you. Second part, let us have a look. I'm coming back to China. Let's review China's role in the global affairs in the world today, with particular reference on its relationship with G20. The reason I'm mentioning G20 is G20 is a platform that has a balanced representation between developed countries and developing countries. First such international organization. I will give you a few signature years in my mind, because I personally participated in these events. 4 signature years in which China or China's involvement in global governance has taken a turn. The first year I would like to mention in 2003, because it was in 2003 when French was the chair of G7. And for the first time, with French as the chair, G7 invited 5 big developing countries, heads of state, to participate in a consultation with G7. First time, developing countries found themselves face-to-face with developed countries to discuss global governance issues. China really cannot survive alone with other countries collapsing, bringing down the global financial system and economic regime we have. We cannot really prosper in isolation. That is the realization, that is the basis for China's decision to commit no more than 10% of the number British was asking, meaning $50 billion to buy IMF bonds. But of course, that summit was a huge success. We succeeded not only in meeting that target, we overfulfilled. And the final pool was to the amount of 1.1 trillion US dollars, much more than what we had anticipated. And another significant achievement we made was in autumn of that year in Pittsburgh, at Pittsburgh Summit. In that summit, not too many people noticed there was a sentence in the leaders' declaration declaring G20 as the premier forum for international economic cooperation. Premier forum. We all know before that, the premier forum was G7. You have a problem. If you have a problem, you have a crisis, G7 will come together, discuss this, and put forward the policy options. If you have currency exchange rate fluctuation, G7 will come forward, propose a solution. Now, not anymore. No G7 as a premier forum for international economic governance. It was G20. And also 8+5 was no more, was gone, explicitly. Not the only country, Mexico was a little reluctant because Mexico was originally in the 5. Now it was not in the BRICS 5, BRICS 4. So Mexico was a little lost as to that decision. But anyway, that was a very important, a turning point in the history of G20 and the global governance. Then, of course, we all remember last year in my hometown, Zhejiang, in Hangzhou, we had the summit of G20, Hangzhou Summit. 29 deliverables. And most important of all is China, after much persuasion and coordination, had put on the top of the agenda of G20 the issue of development. Think about it. The root cause of global economic imbalance, what is the root cause? Some country will blame currency manipulators, so to speak. Somebody will say this is imbalance in trade. Some country accumulating more surplus than needed, etc., etc. But China, from the very beginning, understood from its own success in domestic governance, economic governance, that is, we need to address this gap between rich and poor. We need to develop. The world needs to develop as a whole. You cannot anticipate global economic balance or sustainable economic development with a large group of countries, developing countries, not yet in the stage of industrialization or in the early stages of industrialization, lacking behind. You create an imbalance. It's inherent. It is not only economic in its sense, imbalance, but also social. Also social and political. That is achieved. Of course, G20 Hangzhou Summit has many more achievements in global governance. Coming back again, I've talked about China's relationship with G20. This is only an example to illustrate China's relationship with the rest of the world has changed dramatically and historically. President Xi Jinping has described this change in the following terms. He said it on several occasions, on different occasions. You look at the screen, that's what he said. China has moved to the central stage of global affairs. China has now stood at a new starting point in history. And also concerning China dream, he said, China has never been so close in its history to the realization of China's dream of national rejuvenation. 3 simple sentences to give us a sense of what has changed, changed between China and the rest of the world. Now the third part, China's view of this new era of globalization and China's response. Meaning, what policy options we have, what strategies, external strategies we should adopt to deal with the emerging new era of globalization that is full of challenges, even full of crises, one crisis after another. I'll mention only a few, some major foreign policies China has been pursuing or keep pursuing. One is peaceful development, with reference in particular to China Dream. Peaceful development is essential both philosophically and in reality. I have a few tips. We can find it in the core value of Chinese culture to build a harmonious world, to have peace among nations. If you read the classics, we all know the order of peace is 家, 国, 天下, family, peace in the family, harmony in the family, and then you move on to country, within the country, and then among countries, 天下, everything under the heaven. Core element is peace as a harmonious relationship. Before I move on to globalism, moving too fast. Huh? Anyway, okay. Peaceful development. I give you 2 perspectives for you to appreciate why China has firmly taken that view. We need to develop peacefully. One is historical, the other is globalization. We all know China had this period of what we call humiliation of 100 years, 百年耻辱, starting from 1840, the first Opium War, to the founding of the new republic in 1949. 109 years, actually, but we call it 100 years, roughly. Within that 100 years, China was never at peace within itself and with others. China was fragmented. China suffered aggression, plunder, all the bad fortunes, bad things happened to China. We were the victim. We were on the receiving end of all the humiliations a nation or a country could suffer. The last one in that 100-year period of time is the war against Japanese aggression, part of the Second World War. We suffered loss of life of over 30 million people. 30 million people died in that war. So when people asking Chinese, any Chinese, saying, why do you have that period of humiliation? Of course we have that period of humiliation. Every Chinese will remember that. But we got two conclusions from that period of time, two lessons we learned. One is we need peace and development. Without peace, there will be no chance for you to grow economically. Without peace, you have nothing. But without economic growth, without economic power, you cannot have peace. You cannot have peace. You will become victimized by foreign aggression, by whatever misfortune that will fall on your head. So peace and development are the two essential elements we need to have if China wants to become a powerful nation, a great nation in the world today. That's why China has been saying peaceful development. We need peace, we need development. You have a historical perspective, historical origin. Secondly is globalization. Globalization has provided China with a development model, a development path that is peaceful. Because globalization has given you this chance to be part of the world market, part of globalization, and you are integrated into the system we have inherited right after the Second World War. So you do have a way out. You don't have to follow the old model of those major powers preceding China. They have to resort to war, to military coercion, etc., to gain economic benefits, to become major powers. In that sense, I think other nations, other countries need to understand the determination China has to defend its core interest. I mentioned core interest here because core interest in Chinese foreign policy represents sovereignty, national interest, and development interest or development achievements. Three things, core interest. Because of which we had suffered in the past, because we will persist in peaceful development, we are all the more determined to defend our sovereignty, to defend our national security, and to defend what we have achieved through economic growth. Never underestimate that determination on part of China, because otherwise, other countries, any country who underestimates China's determination in that respect, will be making a strategic mistake. That is the first I want to spend some time discussing about China's peaceful development policy. The second thing, it's more about global order, world order. We know that after the Second World War, the world order, the global order, was built by victorious nations led by the United States. China was included, but not as a major voice. That system was represented, or it has been represented, by the United Nations, and its core is a system of collective security, with Security Council as the only international organ that can make decisions that will be mandatory or compulsory for every nation to follow under Chapter 7 of the United Nations Charter. But on the other hand, the security of the world was also underpinned by a network of bilateral and multilateral military alliances with the United States at the center. So you have seen two things: the UN security system and the US security system based on military alliances. With more globalized we become, more economically interdependent we become, the UN's role is still very strong. It's universally accepted by all countries, by all nations. But this security arrangement based on bilateral military alliances, multilateral military alliances, I would say was outdated. So China was thinking, or started thinking in this new century, what shall we do about this global order? We need to maintain the United Nations collective security system, because UN has not only focused on security and other matters too, humanitarian, UN peacekeeping. By the way, China is the biggest troop contributor among P5 permanent members of the Security Council. We now deploy more than 3,500 officers and soldiers across the globe, and we are number 2 in our contribution to the budget of UN peacekeeping operations, more than 10%, billions of dollars. So China was thinking what to do. We need to improve upon the global order or the global security system to make it more secure for everyone. We need to have security through cooperation rather than targeting a third party, a third country. Again, we draw our wisdom from Chinese culture. A harmonious world, harmonious relationship among nations. So President Xi and the Chinese leaders presented an idea of globalism in the form of building a global cooperative partnership network, a network of partners. You hear a lot when our leaders are visiting other countries. They signed MOU to establish strategic partnership, comprehensive strategic partnership in the new century, with Russia as a different name, a partnership with strategic collaboration, etc., etc. But in essence, it's a partnership. If you pull them together, it becomes a network. By the end of 2016, China has established over 97 partnerships with different countries and regional organizations, approaching 100. So you can see it's taking shape. It's taking shape. Globalism has taken shape. I don't think we're trying to compete with the United States. We're trying to show there is another way, a peaceful way of cooperating and collaborating in the world today to maintain international peace and security as a support to globalization, to economic growth. I mentioned in the screen that equality, peace, and tolerance are the salient features of this cooperative partnership. What I want to mention is one thing. You might have a question in your mind, because before that, China has taken a position of non-aligned. We're not aligned with any other country. We are opposed to military alliances. We believe this is exclusive in nature. Any alliances by nature will be targeting a third country or a group of other countries. That is by itself destabilizing. It will not contribute to stability. It will contribute to instability. So globalism, or a network of global partnership, actually is an innovation in terms of China's foreign policy along the lines of Chinese culture, because it's combined a global partnership with a creative way of interpreting non-aligned policy. You are non-aligned, but you have a network of friends, basically, so that you can help each other, you will understand each other, you will reinforce each other in our efforts to maintain security and to counter any elements of insecurity. Thirdly, I'll briefly mention what the current role China enjoys in global governance. China has begun to play a leadership role in globalization and global governance by providing Chinese thinking, Chinese ideas, and even concrete China's programs. We all know China used to be quite passive in our participation of global governance. As the video show at the very beginning of this dialogue, China has joined hundreds of international treaties and organizations. China has established diplomatic relations with over 170 countries. So China is right in the middle of a full international relation, international partnership. But now China has realized, as a great nation, as a global power, we need to be more proactive. Proactive in the sense that perhaps we should play a leadership role by not forcing our wills on others, but by leading with examples, with our own thinking, with our own ideas. The developmental issue, importance we attach to development is one example. Another example is the Belt and Road Initiative. The Belt and Road Initiative is an innovative idea in global governance. It transcends regions, regional division. It transcends ideological division. It transcends monetary regional divisions. You know, it will link IMB use IMB, the region mostly using IMB, with regions mostly using ruble of Russia, and of course US dollars. So it is really an innovative idea to build a community of nations with shared interests and a shared destiny. With that in mind, China has quickened the pace of negotiation on the APEC-wide free trade agreement. We are trying to reinforce the core position of the UN in maintaining global peace and security. We will, working together with Germany, who is the next chair, and Argentina, who will be followed in 2018 as the chair of G20, to implement decisions were made at Hangzhou last year. We will also keep the momentum of 2030 UN Sustainable Development Goals. That is a program adopted by the United Nations. More than 189 members have agreed to initiate a program to help developing countries to achieve sustainable development by 2030. And China set an example in Hangzhou last year to have high standard national programs. Not only China, but other G20 members to take the lead. This is the way China should do, I believe, to make globalization work and to make globalization great again. Before I'm moving on to my last part, I will add that people do worry about globalization, but I can assure you, globalization will not disappear overnight. Many of you are CEOs, chairmen of big corporations, big companies, and your business are all over the world. There is no single commodity, a consumer good, that you can say that is made in a particular country. Maybe it's some very, very simple things. The phones you are using today, take Apple, for example, it always says in the back, very small letters, assembled in China, designed in California, in the Bay Area, basically. And they have imports. We have components imported from the US, South Korea, from Taiwan, from Japan, from UK, all put into this phone, this small phone. So can you say made in China? That puts another question. Of course, I'll later on talk about trade deficit with the US, but the question mark on trade surplus we have enjoyed with the United States. Even Boeing airplanes, you ask Boeing people, they will tell you Boeing is only assembled in the United States, not made in the United States. China made over 5% of Boeing airplane components for Boeing. And Boeing has announced its plan even to move the assembling plant of 737 to Zhejiang, to China. So the assembly thing is moving into China. So while we need to be aware of the challenges in globalization, in the direction where it will go. We need to be rest assured globalization will not be going away. It's in our blood, in the lifeline of each and every nation. Now, lastly, but not the least, how to manage Sino-US relationship with Trump administration. People are very much worried about the future of China-US relationship. Where will it go? Will it be in a crisis mode? We certainly have seen, we have heard words uttered by President-elect Trump about one China policy, etc. We have seen some of the things he has said he will do once he is in the White House. So people began to worry about China-US relations. The first point I want to make is that the fundamentals of China-US relationship are basically sound. The fundamentals, meaning we are the first and the second largest economies in the world. Our economies are interwoven so much that if we start a trade war with each other, we will hurt each other. You may hurt yourself more than the other party. We have shared interest in maintaining peace and security, not only in Asia, but in other parts of the world too. We have shared responsibility in tackling global challenges such as climate change, energy safety, etc., etc. That being said, we need to look ahead and to see what options we have, what measures we need to take in order to continue this relationship on an even keel. It is extremely important because we are the two most important countries in the world, to be honest. This is the most important bilateral relationship in the world today, or one of the most important if we have to be diplomatic. I have a few personal suggestions. One is for China to continue to engage the United States when the new administration comes into office and the process of policy review begins in earnest for the purpose of enhancing cooperation bilaterally to minimize the risks and even the dangers we will have if we do not cooperate, if we let our differences fester. We need to seize a window of opportunity that always presents itself when any new administration comes into office, because they will review the policies, including Americans' China policy. They will review. Review is a good thing. You review, and if you're wise, you have better policy decisions. So I can see a window of opportunity popping up now, as it did during the first year of Obama administration in 2009. China and the United States negotiated a joint statement, 7 or 8 pages long, outlining what the two countries should do to maintain a good relationship in the first 4 years of our Obama administration. But of course, that plan ran into obstacles once Obama returned to Washington. He was criticized by conservative forces both in Congress and elsewhere. But we did succeed in mapping out the way forward. I think we do have an opportunity now for two sides to talk through tough issues like trade, South China Sea, even Taiwan, and other, those very tough issues concerning the core interest of both countries. Take trade, for example. I talked about trade surplus China enjoys, or trade deficit US suffers in our bilateral trade. There are lots of reasons to this trade deficit on the part of the United States. We do not take all the money in our own pockets. Part of it were the value added from China's imports of components from our neighbors and our trading partners. Part of the surplus China enjoys actually were put into the pockets of American companies investing in China. And there are other ways to reduce the surplus if we look at from a positive perspective. For instance, US can lift the ban on two things. One is export their shale gas and shale oil to China to establish an extensive energy relationship with China. China needs lots of shale gas, natural gas, of course, partly to eliminate the foggy weather we suffer in Beijing. But that would be a good thing. US become a supplier, one of the suppliers of our energy sources. Secondly, they can lift bans on some of the not so sensitive dual usage items, dual usage commodities to China. They export these goods to China. Actually, the technologies involved are only a few years ahead. China will catch up very quickly, but there is a huge market in China. If the United States does not seize it now, it will be seized by other countries. So I'm just have a brief look at the trade patterns between two countries. These two things we have, if the United States can agree to do these two things, you can reduce trade surplus on part of China dramatically. Not to talk about other things. Secondly, at the same time, it is very important for the United States, a new administration under Mr. Trump, to understand there are some issues that fall in a domain of China's core interest that it cannot touch seriously. Taiwan is one thing, one China policy, one China principle. That has been a policy commitment, a policy carried out by 8 US administrations since President Nixon visited China in 1972, early February 1972, successively. And Trump administration need to carry that policy forward for the sake of China-US relations, because this is the very basic political foundation upon which our bilateral relationship has rested. If you take that away, the whole thing will go away, will collapse. So this is non-negotiable. You can a lot of things to negotiate with as leverage, but this is one of the issues that cannot be negotiated, non-negotiable. At the same time, China needs to talk to the US as early as possible about opportunities of cooperation, not only bilaterally, as I mentioned, in terms of trade, in terms of maintaining peace and security in South China Sea, in Western Pacific, in terms of creating peace in the Middle East, in terms of fighting terrorism across the globe, and also in the realm of global governance, for instance, climate change. We heard President-elect Trump talking about withdrawing US commitment to Paris Agreement on climate change. You have seen the picture of two presidents, President Xi and Obama, handing the certificate, official certificate of letters, national commitment to former UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, to show that the two biggest emitters of carbon dioxide, we are together in this collective effort to fight climate change. If US withdraws, China will be standing alone on the stage like I am doing now, standing alone on the stage. But China will, of course, keep holding this flag, but we need the United States to join us. We need other countries to be with China and the United States in meeting the challenge that is the common challenge of all mankind. These issues, of course, include trade and investment, global regimes on trade and investment, concerning WTO, concerning energy security, counterterrorism, etc., etc. These are the things I mentioned in China-US relationship, how to manage this important relationship. A lot of things to do, but in some, we need to work together. A new president may be unpredictable, but the world is not a place that will allow us to make huge mistakes by simply being unpredictable. We need to foresee the future and map a way out for all of us, because we are in this together. We're not alone. Here I want to mention the role of Hong Kong. We are all in Hong Kong. Hong Kong continues to be an international financial center, an international shipping center, and ranks pretty high on the list of global competitiveness, meaning it's very good here to do business. You have rule of law, you have huge pool of talents in whatever field you're looking at, especially in the financial field. So Hong Kong can contribute a lot, not only to a better future for Hong Kong and China as its motherland, but also in terms of China's initiative to promote global cooperation, such as the initiative of One Belt and One Road. Some people say Hong Kong could be a super connector. I agree certainly with that, but you need to define better where you would connect, how you would connect, in what way you would contribute to the realization of that great initiative. To sit down and think about it. And I'm confident because Hong Kong has contributed a lot in the last 3 or 4 decades in China's modernization. Without capital from Hong Kong or through Hong Kong, the opening up, China's opening up that took place, first started in late 1970s, will not be a success. Hong Kong was essential. Hong Kong also contributes a lot to China's diplomacy. We have lots of foundations, including China-US Exchange Foundation, sponsoring lots of programs between China and the United States to promote a better relationship. I remember last year, Hong Kong hosted a hugely successful seminar to discuss among international professionals and experts, mostly lawyers, on law of the sea, to discuss the arbitration case presented by the Philippines on South China Sea, presenting a balanced view, a balanced picture to the international community, which is largely accepted. So I can foresee the future wherein Hong Kong will keep playing an essential role in China's modernization, in China's expanding role in global governance, as well as China's diplomacy per se. I will end by saying China now is a global power, or with global reaches, global influence. So China has no option but to be in the forefront of globalization and global governance. Thank you very much for your patience. Thank you.